of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, and I'm going to be doing rounds 5 through 8 of the mock draft that Matt started earlier this week. If you like the video, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We're setting a new goal of 750 for the end of August. So we appreciate it as a small channel if you'd hit that button for us. And if you'd like to do a mock draft with us, email us at tffforecast@gmail.com. Kicking it off here, I'm going at the 501. So Matt had just taken Baker Mayfield, and Bo Nix is right there. Obviously, we all know that he's not the hugest Bo Nix fan. And I'm going to wait, I think, for a while on Bo Nix because I'm looking at how I like to build teams and wait on that second quarterback a little bit. And a lot of these teams that are coming up here have, that top end quarterback. So I'm going to look down the board a little bit, and my next highest ranked receiver is Garrett Wilson. So I do think that that's a good compliment. Getting that third wide receiver in round 5, I think is a huge thing for 3 wide receiver builds, and Chase, McConkey, and Wilson out of the 1 spot, I think is a very strong trio, despite spending a first, third, and 5th round pick. So you got your anchor running back, you've got an anchor quarterback who should be top 10, and then you have your 3 stud wide receivers. I really like the start for that team. Going on to the second spot here, right? You got 1 wide out, 2 running backs. I definitely think it'll be time to go back in on receiver here. So looking down the receiver board a little bit, right? You got Rashee Rice, who unfortunately is suspended. Marvin Harrison, he's been looking better in camp, and Kyler, I guess, has been thrown to him. He's getting the unguardable tag, in camp. That's kind of what happens at this point during the season. I'm not sure I'm super in there, but let's see who else I have in the area. So DK Metcalf and Cortland Sutton, I both have ranked ahead of Marvin Harrison. So I'm going to go in on DK Metcalf here. I think as your 2, he's got a pretty stable and safe 1, and now has a pretty stable and safe number 2 as well. So let me find Metcalf here. And we all know that Rodgers likes to lock in on his number 1 wide receiver. So I do really like Metcalf for this season. They just signed him to a huge contract. I think he's going to do very well in that Steelers system. Moving down now to the third team. I think as well, I really like to get a third wide receiver here if you can, especially when stacked up against having a stud running back and having a stud quarterback. So I could understand like the urge to take Bo Nix here. But I'm a little bit hesitant to take Nix when you have Lamar this early, especially in a 3 wide receiver format. You just end up getting further and further behind the 8 ball at your other positions. Now, if you don't mind that as much and you have a lot of conviction in Bo Nix, then I think this is a decent time to go in on your second quarterback, right? It's the earlier portion of when I would do it, but if you're going to do it, the 5th round is kind of about that time. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to go with Cortland Sutton here. I really like Sutton. They just signed him to an extension, and I just really think that he is being undervalued in these rankings specifically. I know it's really hard to look down at 76 versus 31 in rankings and pull the trigger on something like that, but I guess that's why we're doing this, right? Is it shows a little bit more of, a different look at a mock and, how we would maybe be looking at the overall draft board. Again, here with this team, right, I really like starting builds like this, right, where you get Jefferson, Hurts, Bowers, Cook. You get 1 of each position. And then you kind of, throughout the season, have your studs kind of in place at the top of each position group. And if you make a good waiver wire move, you've got somebody. If you hit later in the draft from round 5 down, then you've got somebody good as well. So I kind of like how this has started. And for me, I'm going to go in here now on somebody that, if the suspension comes down as 2 or 3 games, I'll definitely move up ahead of Metcalf, right? But since there's some murkiness around that, and if it could be 4, maybe even 6 games, that's going to be detrimental early in the season to his value. But now I'm going to take Rashee Rice here. With the build, too, specifically, I think, getting somebody that could fill in that number 2 wide receiver role really admirably, after the first month of the season is high value for a team like this that, you'll be able to kind of fill out your receivers until Rice is there and have studs kind of at all of your positions. So I like that more than, say, having him as my 4th wide receiver as a flex, right? If you go 3 wide receivers super early and then you're having him as your 4th, I'd probably be looking to go quarterback or running back in this range. But for this build, I kind of like how it feels to have Rice on a team like that, even though he's going to miss the first month. All right, and going down now, we got one quarterback and two running backs here. So this again feels like a receiver needy team. So we're going to continue the receiver run here and go in on Marvin Harrison at this point. So looking down the board, right, he kind of stands out in a tier of his own here at this point. Now I know Worthy and JMO are in the mid-20s for me, along with Travis Hunter. So we're going to go in on Marvin Harrison here now, though, end the slide. And he's somebody that I still have a little bit of reservations about. I mean, he's getting the unguardable tag, but a lot of the clips you see from camp are him making contested catches, and it's like, okay, yeah, he's unguardable, but he's making the contested catches. But if he's going to be pushing the sidelines still, and they're not going to send him on as many crossers or on as many short area routes where he can earn targets at a higher share, I'm just a little bit worried about his volume going into this year again. All right, and then now we've got two receivers and a running back here. So I think now is about the time where we'd start looking towards Breece Hall, right? We've got or we just had a long run of receivers, right? So at some point, right, I think a couple of people in the industry would say, like, when you get to 3 or maybe 4 in a position in a row, that maybe you look to pivot at that point. But I like the receivers in this range quite a bit. So, if you like Ted McMillan, he's been getting rave reviews about being a target hog in camp. And then Travis Hunter, I mean, obviously he's playing both ways in camp, but I do really think he's going to be featured as the short area target, short to intermediate target in the Jacksonville offense. So I do like both of those rookies a lot. Mentioned Worthy and JMO, but I think I'm going to go in at the running back position. So Breece Hall I actually have ranked below Kamara, below Ken Walker. So I do have Kamara currently ranked 14. So I'm going to go in on Kamara here, lock him in as the second running back for this team. And that might feel a little bit early, especially with like a Bo Nix on the board, or if you really like Breece Hall, I think he's going to have a bounce back season. I could see going that direction, but I just think Kamara's safety in the 5th round, it kind of ensures that you raise the floor of your team, which some drafters don't like drafting like that. So Kamara's probably not going to be the guy for you because the upside is just not that high, with not a huge rushing total potential and on a bad offense, right? There's definitely knocks on Kamara, but I do think overall the receiving game work is just so hard to ignore. All right, now this team, right, gets a gift, right? Because, and maybe this doesn't happen in real life, but getting Bo Nix at the end of the 5th round probably isn't super realistic in your home leagues if quarterbacks go a little bit quicker than we're used to. But if I was Team 7 in this situation, I would be running to the draft board to take Bo Nix. And Matt might not agree with that. Matt might take Herbert or Caleb or Drake May. But I do think Nix has quite a bit of rushing upside and showed he can throw for a lot of touchdowns. And he's going to have a full offseason going into his 2nd year to improve. They got better pass catchers around him. The running game is going to be way better than it was last year. So I think, all indications are that Bo Nix should be set up for a big 2nd season. And I do like him in the 5th round here quite a bit. Again, we're going to be going back to the quarterback position because this team also does not have a QB yet. And, we've got lots of QBs available in that, 10 to 12 possible finish range here. And the guy I have ranked the highest currently is Jared Goff. But I'm going to play the ADP game just a little bit here because I could see this team wanting to go back to back on quarterbacks. And I do think that Kyler Murray presents quite a bit of upside with his legs. And if he does figure it out with Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he could be in for a big passing season too, like 4,000 yards potentially, which is something we haven't seen him do. So we know McBride is established, great short area target. James Conner's great out of the backfield, and we just need Marvin Harrison to step up into that alpha receiver for Kyler Murray to flourish here as a passer. So I do think there's quite a bit of upside. I recently moved him way up in my rankings. If you haven't watched that video, go watch my rankings updates for July. And I'm starting to build confidence in picking Murray again, despite how I felt about him last year. I just felt like if he didn't score a long touchdown on the ground, he was just not that good. But I have better hopes for him this year. And he still can score on the ground, right? He's talked about rushing more. And so Kyler, I think, is a good pick here. This team needs a receiver badly, so I'm going to take a look at the receiver position here. I know, obviously, Breece Hall is starting to stand out a little bit. But I think at the receiver position, that Worthy, it would be a great option, or Ted McMillan or Travis Hunter. So, looking at how this team is built out, he needs a second wide receiver. So at this point, I would want to go with somebody that I feel good about their volume. I wouldn't necessarily be taking a shot on upside like I would if it was wide receiver 3 or 4 at this point in the draft. So the guy I feel the best about volume between those three is Ted McMillan. So I'm going to go with him here. I do think that we can expect him to draw a lot of targets, and he's been excellent in camp, building chemistry with Bryce Young. And I think Bryce Young is in a position this year, after how he finished last year, to really hit the ground running. So again, that's a team build thing. I have Worthy ranked ahead of McMillan, but I do think that Worthy is a lot more boom bust, right? And I think Worthy, you need him to be good down the field, and you need him to actually get a little bit more volume than maybe we should expect him to get, especially once Rice is back, to be a stable 2, right? Because you're going to get a lot of boom bust with him, I have a feeling, this season. So, and I think the boom weeks are going to be great. I mean, we saw how good he was over the second half of the year, but I'm going to go with McMillan for the safe workload there. All right, this team needs a quarterback badly, right? And in rounds 5 and 6, right, he could go quarterback here to really lock in his quarterback room. He could get another running back, could get another receiver at this point. But he's definitely going to take one quarterback. So let's look at that first. And then of this group, I don't have Herbert ranked above Goff, Purdy, or Dak. So I think at this point, I'm going to go with Goff. You don't want to miss on your first quarterback here at this point, right? And so even though it's not the flashiest pick, even though it's not the biggest upside, when you don't have a quarterback yet, going in and taking a gamble on, say, somebody like an Anthony Richardson type is just really tough to miss on as your number 1, because then you're just so far behind the 8 ball. With Goff, it's going to be a good offense. He's going to be solid. He's going to have some big weeks. He's going to have some 14-point weeks, and that's just what it's going to be with Goff. He's going to finish around QB10, though, and getting that safety is really important, I think, in the 5th round if you're hunting your first quarterback. And then looking down here, right, we could go with Breece Hall. We could go with Ken Walker. If you wanted to go another running back, I think these two kind of stand out above the group. They haven't adjusted Joe Mixon yet, but they will soon. And then at receiver, I just don't think there's anything really here at receiver worth taking over locking in your quarterback, right? You can get a receiver in the next round. That's probably going to be better than what you can get at quarterback. So I'm going to double tap here. I don't do this a lot at quarterback, but I do think Brock Purdy here also gives you quite a bit of upside. The receiver group right now is very questionable. It's like who's going to play, but I do think Purdy is able to overcome that, and I think with McCaffrey healthy and Kittle healthy, they'll figure it out at wide receiver. Like Jennings should be in camp. Pearsall looking good so far, so I do think Purdy's a good pick there. And going quarterback kind of highlights the urgency of being on one of the ends. If you don't go in at quarterback, I would very much caution waiting too long, because if there is a run in your league, you're going to get left out. So you can either start the run there, feel like maybe you're reaching a touch on quarterback, but it's better than getting left out and then having to use, having to rely on Tua or having to rely on Trevor Lawrence, somebody down in that 18 to 22 range. Sam Darnold, he was great last year, but new situation entirely. So I like the thought of going 2 quarterbacks there. All right, now looking back at Team 9, we got 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 1 quarterback. Can pretty much go anywhere with this pick. So I'd be looking to wide receiver first, because I need another right Worthy, JMO. DJ Moore has been looking good, supposedly in that Amon-Ra St. Brown role. We've been hoping for that, but not necessarily locked in. I'm going to end the Ken Walker slide here. I'm going to go with Ken Walker. Right, fill in that flex spot. So that's the 3rd running back there. And I do like getting my 3rd running back a little bit quicker when I have more running backs up front, right? If I go in on Bijan, I go in on Brown. If one of them gets hurt, you want to make sure that you're still strong at running back, right? So the urgency to get a running back in my flex and the urgency to get another good running back on my bench increases for me. And whether or not that's fair, it's more just like a build, right? If you're just all in on wide receiver after going with 2 running backs. And you're going to be behind the teams that built their teams up top with wide receivers. So I'd rather make sure I'm strong at running back if that's the way I'm going to go in my draft. So that's why I didn't necessarily go with like a worthy. I have 2 good receivers who should have decent volume. I'll be able to fill that third spot, and I feel very strong about having Walker in my flex at this point. So this team needs a quarterback now, so we'll see who ends up falling back to them. All right, this team went 3 wide receivers up top and has Kyron. So I think at this point too that they'd be pretty excited to get Breece Hall in round 6, fill out that RB2 spot with a high upside player that's going to be in a heavy rushing attack this year. We got 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs with this team, Bo Nix. And so now I think the slide is going to end here on Jordan Kittle. So, doesn't get in at the wide receiver position again. Kind of has a similar build with Barkley and Irving as Bijan and Chase Brown. So this team definitely is going to need a running back quick. But, if you miss on Breece Hall, looking down the board now, right, this is like a totally different tier. So you're going to hope that one of these guys make it back to you in the next round, or you're going to go quarterback, right, and not necessarily worry so much about your running backs. But, we'll see. Again, I just think Kittle in the 6th round is a very good value, and you got to kind of take the board where it gives you opportunity there. All right, 2-2 and a quarterback again. So let's take a look all the way across the board here. So you've got Herbert, Caleb, May, Stroud, Dak. You guys know I love Dak, so I think I'd have him the highest of that group. Running back feels a little meh right now. I think I'd go in on Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, or DJ Moore here, or even Travis Hunter. But the receivers are starting to look better again, right? You look back at the board, you had 5 go off and only 1 around this whole turn. So the receivers are starting to come back into value here. You see that a lot of teams over here have strong receivers too. So, that could kind of set you up for, if you think 1, 2, 3, 4 receivers are still good value here, and then there's a couple other names even in there, I might pivot and try and get my second quarterback here. So I'm going to go in on Dak Prescott. I've been getting Dak a lot in round 7 of these mocks, and I just think he's a lot more valuable than that. So getting him in the middle of the 6th round of 10-team league is very good in my opinion. If he stays healthy, that's going to feel like a steal. We haven't really had him outside the top 4 rounds, so and he's getting pushed down quite a bit too, right? You see how many names are still in front of him at quarterback. So, be wary of that, be knowledgeable of that, and make sure you know where your, favorite players are and where you're comfortable taking them. All right, going down here now. This team also needs a quarterback, but also could use a receiver. So let's see. We got running back, we got receiver. I think Worthy's slid far enough here. I'm going to go in on Worthy and, get the wide receiver 3 with upside, right? I mean, I guess that's kind of how we can describe him, despite the fact that I have him at wide receiver 24. So, I guess in 10-team, that is wide receiver 3 range. But, for starting out with no receivers in your first 3 picks, I think McLaurin, Harrison, and Worthy is a very good trio. You got the older vet, stable, should be really good with Daniels. Got that stack in place. And then you got 2 high upside second-year players that I think could really elevate this team for the 2025 season. All right, again, this is my favorite build again, right? Like, it's maybe not favorite. I do like the wide receiver heavy early, but this build makes it fun to draft as you go through the rest of the rounds because there's nothing really urgently that you need. So you could go in on running back. I've been finding myself just gravitating so hard to Travion Henderson over all these guys. I did have David Montgomery ranked the highest of this group. But I'm sorry, I had Chuba Hubbard, then David Montgomery, and then James Conner, and then Travion Henderson. I'm definitely changing that. Henderson's going to be inside my top 18 or 17. I think I might put him right behind Kenneth Walker. I'm just getting very hyped on him. He should see a lot of passing game work. Drake May in his 2nd season should be just that much better as a passer. And, adding him as a 2nd-round player to be featured in the passing game, I think is a huge deal for fantasy. So I'm going to go with Travion Henderson here. I think it's going to be tougher and tougher for me to not be excited to take him pretty much at every pick. Anywhere you want Henderson, I'm kind of okay with. All right, so we need a running back here on this team. We need another quarterback. Maybe Sam Laporta starts getting into the picture here. But I do think that with only one running back here, that we should get in on another one before your top 20 runs out. So Hubbard is going to go there, and I like Hubbard quite a bit this year. He's gotten decent volume the last 2 seasons. Finished just outside the top 10 last year. He was great pretty much throughout the season. He got a little banged up, but I do expect him to lead the way again this year. 280 to 300 touches, I think, is very much within his range of outcomes. All right, and we need everything on this team still. So looking down the board, I think we go in on quarterback first here because you expect a quarterback to go with team one. So, unless you have two that you feel really good about, then okay, you can wait. But for me, I think Herbert kind of stands out here. I do expect the rushing attack to be better this year for the Chargers, but after the bye last year from week 6 on, Herbert was excellent throwing the ball. They've gotten more weapons around him. I think Trey Harris is going to be great for him down the field. Ladd McConkey, full season, after kind of slow pedaling it early in the year last year. So I think Herbert could be in for an excellent season this year statistically. And then going to the turn now. So, right, we're going to take a quarterback here as well. I have Justin Fields ranked the highest of this group. So I'm going to take him here. I know he just hurt his ankle in practice, but he's back out there. I think he's going to be fine. He represents super high upside, right? I mean, the rushing is hard to deny, and he's going to be productive as long as he's out there, right? The downsides for him, injury risk because of, just naturally taking on more risk of when you're out there running a lot. And the passing just probably isn't going to be good. So, ideally he stays on the field. But overall, there's always that risk with Fields possibly getting benched or the discussions around that. And that can get annoying when you have him on your team. But overall, I do like Fields quite a bit. I do see him inside the top 10 of quarterback rankings a lot. I would say a big reason he gets put in the top 10 of rankings is because he's one of those guys in one quarterback leagues that like absolutely should be getting drafted. So you can't put him at like 13 or 14 and just like say, oh, take him at the very end of your drafts. It's like, well, I mean, all these guys that we're talking about right now all present a similar level of upside, but like Fields has a different level. And when he's out there, you're going to be wanting to start him. But if you pair him with somebody a little further down the rankings in a 10-team one quarterback league, it's like, okay, then that's a great combo to have. So that's why in Superflex, I have him pushed down a little bit more. All right, we got 2 more rounds left. So let's pick up the pace a little bit here. So I do think at the turn, again, you look at the tight end position, you figure Laporta and Hawkinson kind of stand out above the rest of the group. If you miss on them, you're probably just waiting until the very end of your draft. So I'm going to take Laporta here. I do think he still can be productive in a new offense, and that he might be featured in a little bit more high target way, like he was in the second half of the year last year. He basically had a bad 6-7 game stretch in terms of targets, but he was very consistent as a rookie, and he was consistent down the stretch last year. So, I think going into this year, we should expect maybe a little bit more of that than the high volatility or the low targets that he was getting kind of in the early part of last year. This team needs a receiver now, team 2. So let's look at the receiver position. And we still got Jameson Williams on the board here. So I'm going to take Jameson here. I think that he's going to be featured as well, right? We're taking 2 Detroit players. There's going to be a lot of offense here, despite the fact that they're likely to take a step back, right? I mean, they're probably not going to score as much as they did last year. They're not going to be playing all their games in a dome either like they were last year. I mean, their first 15 games, I think, were in a dome last year. But there's been some reports that he's getting treated more as the alpha number 1, right? So like that outside, down the boundary, over the middle of the field type of receiver. Obviously, Amon-Ra is great, right? He's going to be the high target earner. But this feels like it could develop into like a Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, right? Where we've kind of been waiting for JMO to break out. And it felt like he did a little bit last year. He was wide receiver 19. But it was on a lot of long touchdowns, and the targets were a little bit inconsistent. But if his role evens out and it's more 7-8 targets a game with every once in a while still scoring that long touchdown, I think he could really step into a fantasy role where he's critical for your team. So I do like JMO this year. I did move him up in that video I was talking about to 25. I do think I'm going to be stretching up a little bit to get him above his ADP. All right, this team needs quarterbacks. So this is when, right, you go QB in the first, right? You're looking in the 7th round. This is when I am definitely looking to get in on quarterback. So the guy I have ranked the highest of quarterbacks here is, let me just confirm I don't have anybody buried. Nope, nobody down there is Caleb Williams. So again, little chalk off the top, but Caleb has all kinds of excitement around him, right? Ben Johnson's first head coaching gig kind of went there for Caleb Williams to try and develop and build the talent around him. And I would mostly ignore the noise from training camp. Ben Johnson's trying to get established. He's trying to get his offense in, right? And he's only going to give it small bits at a time, right? So like, if they're not grasping what he's giving them, and Ben Johnson feels like it's like 10% of what he wants to ultimately implement, the frustration will come out, right? And Caleb needs to be able to adapt with that, right? And he will. And so I definitely think Caleb's in for a good year. And I've said this before. I think adversity early in camp is good because I think then you have something to build off of. You have something to work towards. You can't sit there and complain that nobody would watch film with you and then also complain that you're getting aired out because you don't understand the offense well enough, right? It's like, no, that is your motivation to work. He will sit with you. You're going to learn in his system. So anyways, I think it's all noise, and I wouldn't worry too much about that when you're picking Caleb Williams. Again, here you need a quarterback. So again, this is probably why I took Dak in the early 6th round, right, or in mid 6th round, because quarterbacks I just had a feeling were going to fly off here because there were so many of the builds that how I like to draft, right, where you had the quarterback up top and then wait until 6, 7, 8, maybe 8, 9, if you're really going to wait. But I'm going to take Drake May here. And I already highlighted May with Henderson, so you get the Henderson-May stack a little bit, right? You're going to get a bunch of that offense on your team. And stacking is something I don't always recommend, but when you do it like, running back, quarterback, or even if it was receiver, quarterback, when you do it with your 6th, 7th round pick, I think that's okay, right? I just don't generally like to do it with 2 of my first 3 picks, for example. Like last year, Hurts and A.J. Brown were gettable in a 2 QB league in the first 2 rounds. And like if AJ Brown gets hurt like he did, then Hurts was just kind of not that good for the 6 weeks AJ Brown was out. And when he came back, Hurts got better fantasy wise. But I don't like that where one gets hurt, so you already don't have him, and then he affects the other player negatively that you also drafted early. So one injury kind of knocks 2 of your best players out. So down here though, right, you have like a base of your team set up. And so, I don't mind it as much because it's your 6th and 7th round pick. It's not as critical for your team. Now this team 4 is urgently needs wide receivers because Rice is going to be out to start the year. So he's going to be getting it on wide receivers with probably his next 3 picks. All right. Similar story here. Quarterback run is in full effect. Jordan Love is next. Jordan Love. I'm also a Packer fan on top of being a Charger fan. So, I did knock him down a little bit recently, and I didn't love to do it, but I do think that there is going to be a little bit of growing pains with the new receiving core early. So I think they're going to lean into the same offense they had at the end of last year, a little bit more run heavy. And I think Love will get better as the season goes on statistically. But unfortunately, that early start coupled with the fact that I don't know if he's going to go back to running very much, right? We don't know. We didn't get a lot of reports on the knee injury. I haven't seen anything about him running in camp a lot. I haven't seen anything about him wanting to run more. So, I know 2 years ago he was the 5th overall quarterback. So, that also presents a level of upside here in the 7th round that I think is worth going in on. All right, wide receiver time for this team. He's got 2 running backs already, but he needs another receiver. So I think here is where I'm comfortable taking the shot on Travis Hunter. I do think that he's going to get quite a high target share. I think he's going to work close to the line of scrimmage, and I think they're going to do their best to get the ball in his hands when he's on the field. So again, he's going to be the 2 in the offense. So I think, and he might be playing some defense too. So we don't entirely know. He's like kind of the ultimate wild card this year, but I do really like his potential role in this offense. All right, another team that needs a wide receiver still. This was the Knicks Kittle team, right? So it's going to be a little bit behind the eight ball at the rest of the positions when you go in on a tight end earlier. So, get to work here in this part of the draft because you get 2 picks here with that should hopefully give you some upside here. So I'm definitely going to be going in on DJ Moore here. I talked about it with Caleb, and DJ Moore I think has been showing he can play in that Amon-Ra St. Brown role. There's been some really good reports about Odunze being unguardable as well. But I do think DJ Moore is probably the safer bet to get a more consistent level of targets. So that's why I have him ranked above Odunze at this point. As much as I love Odunze and as much as I want to move Odunze over DJ Moore, I just don't think that's going to happen. I've always kind of been more of a DJ Moore fan than Matt. But in the 7th round too, this is one of the lowest points you've been able to draft him. And he's also one of those guys where it's like you look at his player card and you feel like you forget that, like, other than his rookie year, he's never finished outside the top 24 at wide receiver, including the last 2 years where he was 6 and 16. And it's not like he had the greatest quarterback play from Caleb Williams last year either. So if Williams improves his play, I think there's an opportunity here for him to be even better than that wide receiver 16. And so it's like, oh man, we're drafting down at wide receiver 30 right now. Like, it feels like that's kind of a steal, even though, game to game, it doesn't necessarily feel like DJ Moore is providing as much value as he really is, in my opinion. All right, this team needs another quarterback. So I think the last quarterback that feels like part of this tier, actually, I'll put McCarthy in there because I do really like McCarthy as well. Or I should say I really like the Kevin O'Connell offense. So, but I'm going to go in on CJ Stroud here just because, there's one of the teams needs a quarterback. And if you have conviction on Stroud over McCarthy, for example, you want to make sure you get that guy first and then kind of fill in whoever you feel good about after that, right? Running back or receiver. I think that team needs a receiver at this point. You go in that robust receiver too. I mentioned it at running back. If you get running backs early that you want to continue to lock in at least 2 more running backs you feel confident in. When you're doing wide receiver early, you also want to have that in mind too, where like you want to have some urgency to get that 4th wide receiver, because if something happens to them, if something happens to one of them, you don't want to feel like you're behind the 8 ball at receiver when you went to build your team with high-end draft capital at receiver. So, all right, this team still needs a receiver, needs a wideout 3 actually. So we're going to get that for them right here. And since this is more of the Chris Olave channel, then I'd like to, I'm going to go in on Chris Olave there. Matt will be happy to see him go there and probably thinks much higher of this team now because he loves Ken Walker and he loves Chris Olave. So this team needs a quarterback, but you're not going to take a quarterback here when this team already has 2, right? Like that's one of the things, know your draft board as you're going through it. When you already have 2 there, there's no reason to go here. Just pick your favorite player and then you can get the quarterback on the way back. So this team here has 2 wideouts and 1 running back. So we need some players here. So let's check out the running backs. I think we're going to go in on James Conner or David Montgomery. I'm going to go in on David Montgomery. I'm ranked higher. And he's one of my favorite players to pick at this range when you go hero running back. I just feel like Montgomery is so good. His floor is so high, and he's going to be out there on the field when healthy. So I love having him. He scores a lot of touchdowns too, which just week to week, it feels like it raises his floor a ton. All right, last round here. So we're going to take a wide receiver for this team with their last pick of this draft of the 8th round, right? And unfortunately, this feels very thin at this point to me. I look down and I think I have Jacoby Myers as my highest ranked receiver at this point. But I'm not going to take him yet because playing the ADP game a little bit, there is an element of this to that. So I'm going to take Devontae Smith, who I have ranked very similarly. I do think he obviously does better when Goddard or A.J. Brown aren't on the field, but I think that ideally they'll be in a situation where they won't be able to run the ball quite as effectively as last year because, Saquon had over 2,000 yards and where he'll be featured a little bit more when they do pass. We know he's got downfield skills. We know he's one of the better wide receivers in the league. It's just the volume isn't necessarily always there for him. So, if he was on if he switched place with, say, T. Higgins, he would be getting drafted in the third round or fourth round, similarly to where Higgins is currently going. All right, this team is now going to take a quarterback. So we're going to get a second QB for this team here, and that's going to be McCarthy. And you can look at the quarterbacks now. I feel like everybody has two. Nope, one more has two. So we'll talk about the rest of the quarterbacks in a pick. So this team needs a receiver. And I think, in my opinion, waited a little bit too long, even though I'm drafting the teams. If in an ideal situation, I would like to have had another receiver here earlier. But to get my fourth and to get a stable receiver, I'm going to take Jacoby Myers. And in the 8th round, that might feel a little early, but, I have him ranked inside the top 30. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned with him. He was a top 15 wide receiver down the stretch after Devontae Adams was traded last year. And his situation has not changed much. I mean, Jack Besh is there, but I think maybe more red zone packages for him. But I don't think he's going to be a huge target earner by any means. And so, Myers and Bowers are, 1A, 1B in passing game. And I expect him to have another really good season. Looking down the board a little bit now, so we see this team can kind of go any way, right? This team still needs a flex player and still needs another quarterback. So this is the point too where everybody else has 2 quarterbacks, where I don't know that I'd go in on quarterbacks. So let's look at the QBs that are here, right? You got Lawrence, Penix, Ward, Young, Tua, Stafford, Geno, Darnold. Like, knowing that everybody else has 2 down the board, I wouldn't anticipate, as people are trying to fill out their starting rosters, that they're going to take a third quarterback yet. Maybe they take one, maybe 2 take one, but I don't know that I feel all that differently about Ward than I do, Trevor Lawrence, or than I do Michael Penix or Bryce Young. So if you feel strongly about Lawrence or Penix, I might do it just to lock it in. But for me, since I did take Kittle and I do feel a little bit more behind the 8 ball at the other positions, I might lock in, say, a third running back at this point, because it feels like after Connor, maybe after Caleb, but this gets bad quick, in my opinion. So I'm going to be taking James Conner here. I feel like he's rock solid, safe when he's on the field. He's got high upside. You get your third running back there in round 8, and you just hope that a quarterback that you like makes it back in round 9. That's how I would handle that, with everybody in front of you having 2 quarterbacks ready. All right, let's look at this. This team needs a flex player and a tight end. So let's maybe look at the tight end position, because TJ Hawkinson is still there. And I think he's kind of the last player that you feel good about, possibly with a top 3 finish at the position. Maybe Kelsey can do it and get back there. I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out with Kelsey, but I think Hawkinson may be the number 2 target earner on the team there. And in that system, he should be great. He was good down the stretch last year. And I would never count him out, right? I mean, obviously, you see he only played 10 games coming off the ACL, but when you look at the actual numbers here, all right, it took him a little bit to get going here, but then he started actually second week he had 9 targets, but didn't score a touchdown. So the outputs are going to look a little bit bad, but the fact that, he was earning targets at a pretty good share here. A lot of green on this player card over the second half of the year. And the touchdowns will come in that offense. All right, we've got a flex player now. I'm not going to take another tight end, so we need a flex player here. And again, depending on how you like to build your team, whether it's running back in the flex or whether it's receiver in the flex, I personally usually like to put a receiver there. But looking at the board overall at receiver, I feel like there's a lot of sameness and not that much that I'm like actively wanting to go after like there is at running back, because I think Harvey now is like the last guy, right? Mixon is hurt. Nobody's really going to be taking him, I wouldn't guess. Quinshon Judkins obviously hasn't signed and has the domestic violence dispute. And then Caleb Johnson, if you believe that he's going to get the volume, I could see him being in the tier with Harvey. But I'm out on Pacheco. Swift could be solid, I guess. I do have him ranked at like 24. Aaron Jones has Jordan Mason to be contending with, and then it just I don't know. I don't like a lot of those players, so I'm going to go in on Harvey to kind of secure the last running back there, and then fill out my wide receiver core after that. And this team urgently needs wide receiver help, so we're going to go look at some of those uninspiring wide receivers that I was just talking about. I guess compared to RJ Harvey, right? That's the point I was trying to make. And here now, I do have Zay Flowers ranked quite a bit lower than most people, but I do still have him, just outside the top 30. So I'm going to take him. Obviously, a lot of boom bust here, but in games that they should be close, he should be featured. I struggle with him because he finishes as wide receiver 25 last year, and it felt like it kind of went ideally. You go and look, and it's like you have so many of these like target games where it's like 2 targets, 1 target, in games that they win. And he got a little more consistent towards the end of the year, but in terms of targets. But even then, it's like a 4 for 34, 2 for 39, 3 for 74. So he caught a long one, But overall, I feel like quite a bit of boom bust, which is why I push him down. I just don't think the booms are high enough to justify how frequently he busts. All right, this team needs a tight end and a flex player. So let's look at wide receiver again. And somebody that I'm getting a little bit more excited about is Calvin Ridley. So I'm going to take him here because I want to talk about him. I think he could be this year's McLaurin, right? For me anyways, didn't know how much I liked Daniels coming into the year. I definitely didn't think Terry McLaurin was going to benefit as much as he did. And so, right, I'm not necessarily sure how much I like Cam Ward, but Calvin Ridley is going to be the beneficiary if it is if Ward is better than I expect. So I think Ridley should be rising up people's rankings slowly but surely. And as we get more and more reports out of camp, if Ridley is really getting a ton of targets and Cam Ward has developed a good chemistry with him, I think he could break the top 30 receivers this season. And the narrative with McLaurin is helping me get there personally because I feel burned by him last year, right? He didn't do so well last year, despite high level of air yards and despite good targets or, a lot of targets, just wasn't necessarily the best coming from Levis. All right. And this team has 2 running backs and receivers. So again, needs a flex player. So we're kind of just looking, we can pull up all flex. And so, Pickens is showing up as the top wide receiver. I'm not huge on Pickens. I think Pickens elevates Dak's play, but in terms of Pickens himself, he's got CeeDee Lamb there that really limits his upside in terms of targets. It's like and he already is kind of a player that's not great on a per target basis, right? Like he could see 10 targets and get 4 catches type of thing. So I struggle with Pickens. Maybe his targets will be better from Dak than anything he's played with, which I would probably expect, but I'm not huge on him specifically. I don't know how consistent his role is going to be. So scrolling down here, looking for anybody that you like more than Odunze, and I haven't found it, and I hit Travis Etienne. So I'm going to take Rome Odunze. I do think that there's an opportunity here for him to step into a major role. If Ben Johnson's offense does hit the ground running, I will really, really like Rome Odunze as a draft prospect. And I really like Odunze as an 8th round pick for sure, but as just a potential high upside player, because if we continue to get reports that his game has improved and that he's catching on to the offense well, I just think that wheels could be up here. I mean, this was a top 10 pick of the NFL draft. Like he could break out in a similar way that we kind of expect Marvin Harrison to break out, and wheels up if that is the case. All right, and then we need, this team only has 1 running back. So again, this is a hero RB build, and we'll grab a running back here for this team, and that's going to be Caleb Johnson. I did mention that, if you wanted to include him up with RJ Harvey and David Montgomery, I'm good with that. So, I'm going to take him here. And I do think that there's an opportunity for Caleb to be a high volume guy, right? That he could easily take that Najee Harris role. And if he gets any level of passing game on top of that, kind of like Najee did, some of those games where Najee would get, randomly 5 targets, I think he could be really good. Now, I obviously like Jaylen Warren. I struggle with Caleb a little bit because of that, because I would hate to take Caleb Johnson, see him get 7 touches in week 1, and Jaylen Warren get 12 or 13 or 14 touches in week 1. And then I'm just like, oh, no. Warren was the draft value because you can, if that sticks through like the first month, you can sell Jaylen Warren, and, everybody's going to be trying to buy Caleb Johnson. So if that does happen and you do take Caleb Johnson, be patient. Don't be selling him just because his volume hasn't been good over the first couple weeks. I do think the volume will come, and they spent their second pick in the draft. It was a third rounder, but it was their second pick in the draft on Caleb. I think he landed in a good spot. And overall, you want Caleb on your team if you can get him at this value. So, all right. And with that, we got through rounds 5 through 8. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, if you want a mock draft with us, drop us an email, drop a comment down below with any critiques, anything else that you would have liked to see, and we'll see you in the next one. Appreciate it.